You're listening to the top cheating audio stories. Enjoy your listening experience. I never thought I'd be sharing something like this on the internet, but I don't know what else to do. I'm in shock, and I still can't believe the last few hours actually happened. My mind's spinning, and I have to get this out before it eats me alive. Let me start with the basics. My name's Ethan, 33 years old, born and raised in a small town that barely changes. I run my own contracting business. Started with small jobs, fixing fences, repairing roofs, anything that needed hands-on work, and now I've built it up enough to where I can take on bigger projects. It's hard work, but it's honest, and I've always liked the feel of building something from scratch. There's a satisfaction in seeing the result of your own effort. Then there's Lily. She's 30, works as a real estate agent in town, and she's damn good at it. She knows how to close deals, charm her clients, and get them to trust her instantly. We've been together for 5 years now, though we've known each other since we were kids. Small towns have a way of making you cross paths with the same people over and over. We started dating in our mid-20s, and it felt like it was meant to be from the start. I've always been more low-key, satisfied with the simple life, but Lily, she's got this ambition in her. She likes the fast-paced world of real estate, the hustle of it all, while I'm the guy who gets home and doesn't mind spending my nights fixing up our house or watching a movie with her. The balance worked, or at least I thought it did. But recently, things have been off. Lily's been distant, a little too caught up in her career, staying late at work, brushing off weekend plans. She's still here, but it feels like her mind is somewhere else, like we're running on autopilot. I catch her staring at her phone or zoning out when we talk. It's been eating at me, this feeling that something's not quite right, but I chalked it up to the stress of her job. Tonight was supposed to change everything. I've been planning this for weeks, maybe months. I was going to propose. I thought if we took this step, if we made it official, it might pull us back together, ground us again. I mean, we've been together for so long, it just felt like the right time. I picked up the ring a few weeks ago. Nothing flashy, but elegant. Something I knew Lily would love. I cooked her favorite dinner, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, a bottle of wine. The whole setup. She came home a little later than expected, looking stunning in a black dress she usually reserves for business meetings. I barely got a kiss on the cheek before she went upstairs to freshen up. She was always like that, professional to a fault. Even at home, we sat down to eat, and the whole time I was waiting for the perfect moment to pull out the ring. I had rehearsed the words in my head 1,000 times. It wasn't going to be anything crazy, just a heartfelt, honest proposal. The kind I knew would mean something to her. I started easing into it, telling her how much I loved her, how we'd build a life together, how I couldn't imagine anyone else. But just as I was about to reach for the ring, she stopped me. "Ethan, wait," she said, putting her fork down. She looked nervous, like she had something weighing on her. My heart was pounding. I thought maybe she had figured it out, that she knew what was coming. "I need to ask you something first," she continued, her voice a little shaky. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling like something was off. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep the mood light. She took a deep breath, her eyes locked on mine. "What do you think about us seeing other people?" I blinked, completely thrown. "What?" She bit her lip, avoiding my gaze now. "I mean, not forever. Just temporarily. I've been thinking about it, and maybe it would be good for us. You know, to see what else is out there before we settle down." My mind went blank. I couldn't process what she was saying. "You want to open the relationship?" She nodded, still not looking at me. "I just think I've never really had the chance to explore, and neither have you. We've been together for so long, and I don't want either of us to have regrets later on. It wouldn't be anything serious, just physical. And we'd have rules, boundaries, everything clear." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "You've been thinking about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "For a while," she admitted. "I didn't know how to bring it up, but I want to be honest with you. I love you, Ethan. I do. But I think we need to know for sure before we commit to forever." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the woman I knew. This wasn't the relationship I thought we had. We were solid, weren't we? And now she was sitting here, casually talking about sleeping with other people like it was just normal. I can't do this," I said, standing up from the table, my hands shaking. "What the hell is going on, Lily? Why are you bringing this up now?" She looked like she was about to cry, but she held it in. "I didn't want to blindside you." I just, I've been feeling this way for a while, and I think it could help us in the long run. In the long run? I repeated, my voice rising. You think screwing around with other people is going to help us? It's not like that, she said quickly. It's just about seeing if we're really meant for each other. I was about to propose to you, I said, pulling the ring out of my pocket and throwing it down on the table. I was going to ask you to marry me tonight, Lily. And now you're telling me you want to sleep with other people? The look on her face was something I'll never forget. Shock, guilt, maybe even a little fear. Ethan, I didn't know. You didn't know, because you never bothered to ask. I shouted. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair, barely able to breathe. I need to get out of here. I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away from her, from that house, from everything. As I walked down the road, the cold night air hitting my face, I felt like my entire world had just collapsed in on itself. I had planned this whole night around the idea that we were solid, that we were going to spend the rest of our lives together. And now she was talking about exploring other people like it was some casual fling we could both just shrug off. The anger started to rise in me, but underneath it, there was something else, something darker, a suspicion that had been growing over the last few months. All those late nights at work, the sudden distance between us, the way she'd been pulling away, little by little. Was this really just about her wanting to explore things? Or was there something else going on? I didn't know the answer, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same after tonight. I pushed through the door of Matt's bar, the familiar clang of the bell above me barely registering in my mind. My head was still spinning from everything that had happened back at the house. The cold air outside had done nothing to calm me down, and my mind was a tangled mess of disbelief and anger. I needed a drink, and I needed to talk to someone who wasn't Lily. The place was pretty empty, but that was normal for a weeknight. The bar itself was dimly lit, with a low hum of a TV playing some late-night sports highlights. A couple of regulars were at their usual spots, sipping their beers quietly. The smell of fried food and stale beer filled the air, a combination I'd grown used to over the years. It was the kind of place where you could come to get lost, drown out the noise in your head for a while. Exactly what I needed. Matt was behind the bar, as always. He was wiping down some glasses, his face lighting up when he saw me walk in. "Ethan," he called out, throwing the rag over his shoulder. "Man, you're out late. Thought you'd be having one of those quiet dinners at home with Lily." I gave him a half-smile, though it felt like my face might crack. "Yeah, well, dinner didn't exactly go as planned." Matt raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "That's so." He motioned toward the bar stool in front of him. "Take a load off, man. What's going on?" I sat down heavily, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened settling over me like a dark cloud. "You got anything strong back there?" I asked. "Coming right up," Matt replied, already reaching for the bottle of whiskey. He poured me a generous shot and slid it across the bar. "So, what's got you looking like someone ran over your dog?" I didn't answer right away. I downed the whiskey in one go, feeling the burn in my throat, but it didn't do much to dull the anger still buzzing in my veins. "It's Lily," I finally said, setting the glass down. "She dropped a bomb on me tonight." Matt leaned forward, folding his arms on the counter. "What kind of bomb?" I took a deep breath. She asked if we could open up the relationship. For a moment, I expected Matt to react the way I had: shock, disbelief, something that showed he was just as blindsided as me. But instead, he just sat there blinking. "Open the relationship," he repeated, his tone surprisingly neutral. "Yeah," I said, narrowing my eyes at him. "She wants us to see other people, as she put it. Says it'll help us figure out if we're really meant for each other." Matt gave a low whistle, but still didn't seem as fazed as I thought he should be. "That's something," he said, nodding slowly. "I mean, at least she's being honest, right?" I frowned, taken aback by how casual he seemed about the whole thing. "Honest? Matt, she just told me she wants to sleep with other people. How the hell am I supposed to take that?" Matt shrugged, pouring me another shot. "Look, I'm not saying it's not a shocker, but at least she's asking for permission, right? Could be worse. She could have just gone behind your back." Something about his response didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "So, what, you think I should just go along with it?" I asked, half joking, half serious. He tilted his head, considering it. Depends. You ever thought about it? I shook my head, feeling a mix of confusion and frustration rising in me. No, I haven't thought about it. Why would I? I love Lily. I don't need to explore anything. Matt smirked, his eyes glinting in the dim light. Love's one thing, man, but we're only human. Maybe she's feeling restless, and this is her way of dealing with it. Maybe it's not about you at all. Restless? I repeated. The idea of Lily being restless in our relationship was something I hadn't considered. Sure, she'd been distant lately, but I chalked it up to work. Had I been wrong? Look, Matt continued, leaning in slightly. You don't have to agree to it. Hell, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But sometimes people just need to feel like they've got options, you know? Maybe this is her way of testing things out before she settles down for good. The words sat heavy in my gut. Was that really what Lily wanted? To test the waters before we got married? The idea of it made me sick, but a part of me wondered if Matt had a point. If she was feeling trapped or unsure, maybe this was her way of figuring things out. But why now? Why right before I was going to propose? I stared into my glass, lost in thought. I don't know, man, I muttered. It feels like everything's upside down. Matt gave me a sympathetic look, but there was something about it that felt off. Like he wasn't telling me everything. Take it one day at a time, he said, patting the counter. And hey, if she's serious about this open thing, maybe you should think about your options too. I didn't respond. My mind was still stuck on Lily's words, on the way she had looked at me when she suggested it, as if this was the most reasonable thing in the world. And now Matt was making it sound like it wasn't that big of a deal. I finished my drink and stood up, feeling more confused than ever. Thanks for the advice, I said, though I wasn't sure how much of it I actually wanted to take. I'm gonna head out. Anytime, man, Matt said with a grin. You know where to find me. As I left the bar, my head was buzzing with more questions than answers. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Matt's reaction had been too calm, too understanding. And for the first time, I started to wonder if there was more to Lily's suggestion than she was letting on. The next morning, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the conversation with Lily and then the weird vibe I got from Matt. I couldn't make sense of it, but I needed to clear my head. So, I went for a run, early morning, before the rest of the town was awake. The cool air helped a bit, but it didn't stop the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. By the time I got home, Lily was already gone for work. I noticed she'd left a note on the counter. We need to talk more. Tonight? I love you. I stared at the note for a moment, unsure of how to respond. I stuffed it into my pocket and went about my day, but the weight of it followed me around like a dark cloud. Later that afternoon, I got a text from Julia, Lily's sister. Coffee later? It read. I hadn't seen Julia in a while, but we were close. She was always the level-headed one in the family, and something told me she wasn't just asking for coffee. Yeah, sure. I texted back. We met up at the cafe downtown, the same place we'd been going for years. Julia was already sitting at a table by the window when I walked in. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. Hey, she said as I sat down. How are things? I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Been better, I admitted. Julia nodded, sipping her coffee. I saw Lily yesterday, she said, not wasting any time. She seemed off, distant. You guys okay? I shifted in my seat, unsure how to answer that. Honestly, I don't know. She hit me with something last night that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. Julia's eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. She asked if we could open the relationship. Says it's just to figure out if we're meant to be together long term. Julia's face froze for a second, then softened into concern. Wow, that's unexpected. What did you say? I told her I couldn't do it, I said. But I don't know where this is coming from, Jules. She's been acting strange for months. Julia set her coffee down, her eyes narrowing in thought. She mentioned something about needing to grow, but she didn't say much else. I thought maybe it was work stress, but an open relationship? I know, I muttered, leaning back in my chair. Something's not right, and I can't figure out what it is. Julia nodded slowly, her face pensive. I'll talk to her, see if she opens up to me. Maybe she's just confused about where she's at in life. Maybe, I said, though I wasn't convinced. There was more going on here, and I had a sinking feeling I hadn't even scratched the surface yet. As I left the cafe, I couldn't shake the unease that had been growing in me since last night. Something about Matt's reaction, about the way Lily had brought all this up, none of it was adding up. And I was beginning to wonder if I had been blind to what was really going on all along. I tried to go back to normal after that coffee with Julia, but it was like a dark cloud had settled over everything. The conversation with Lily still hung in the air, and now Julia's subtle hints about Lily's behavior were gnawing at me. Even Matt's casual reaction from the other night. It all fell off, like the puzzle pieces of my life didn't fit together anymore. But I had a job to do. Work was the only thing that made sense, the only place where things were straightforward. A project needed to be finished, and I buried myself in it, hoping that keeping busy would distract me. At the site, the usual sounds of hammers hitting wood, the scrape of metal, and the hum of drills filled the air. It gave me some peace, at least for a few hours. I hadn't seen Lily that morning. She'd left before I got back from my run. It wasn't unusual for her to head to the office early, especially since she'd been closing on some big properties recently. But after everything, her absence felt heavier. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was keeping something from me, something big. Around lunchtime, I sat on the tailgate of my truck, scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Distraction, maybe? I was still thinking about what Julia had said the day before, how Lily had been talking about needing to grow. That word stuck with me. Grow into what? And why now, after all this time? We've been solid for years. At least I thought so. I tossed my phone back in the truck and picked up a sandwich from the cooler. The guys on site were taking their break, some joking around near the scaffold. I watched them, thinking about how life for them seemed so simple. No secrets, no drama, just a day's work, a paycheck, and a beer at the end of it. But I couldn't escape the gnawing feeling. I knew something was wrong, and part of me knew I was going to have to figure out what it was, whether I liked the answer or not. Later that afternoon, I got home to an empty house again. It was quieter than usual, and I hated it. I could hear the wind outside, the faint creak of the old pipes in the walls. I threw my keys on the kitchen counter and glanced at Lily's phone, sitting on the charging station next to mine. She always left it there when she went to work. I never thought twice about it before, but today it looked different, like it was hiding something. I stood there for a minute, staring at it, my mind racing. I had never gone through her phone before. We weren't that kind of couple. There was trust, or at least there used to be. But now I wasn't so sure. Before I could talk myself out of it, I picked up the phone. It wasn't locked. That was a small relief, though it made me wonder why. Did she trust me that much, or was she just careless? I opened up her text, feeling like my heart was in my throat. At first, everything seemed normal. Texts with clients, messages from her sister, a few from Matt that seemed pretty casual. But then I saw it, an unfamiliar name, Greg H. The messages weren't many, but they were cryptic. Meeting at the usual spot? Can't wait to see you again. And then one that caught me off guard completely. Yesterday was exactly what I needed. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Who the hell was Greg? I scrolled up, trying to see more, but there wasn't much. Lily had deleted most of the earlier messages. My hands were shaking as I tried to piece it together. This wasn't just a random conversation. There was something going on here, something she hadn't told me about. I stared at the phone, my mind spinning. Should I confront her? Should I wait and see what else I could find? Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room, but instead I set it down carefully, as if that would somehow make things less real. I needed to know more. The next few days were a blur. I went back to work, but I couldn't focus. I kept replaying those texts in my mind, wondering what they meant, how deep this thing went. I started watching Lily more closely, paying attention to every little thing she did, every word she said. She was always busy with work, always at the office late, or at least that's what she told me. And then there were the business meetings. Normally, I wouldn't have questioned it. But now, every time she mentioned one, I felt a knot in my stomach. I decided to follow her. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't let it go. I needed proof. I needed to know if this Greg guy was more than just a client or a friend. One afternoon, when she said she had a meeting with a new buyer, I made up an excuse to take the rest of the day off and drove to her office. I parked a block away, out of sight, and waited. About an hour later, I saw her leave. She was dressed up, more than usual, hair done, a tight dress, heels. Something wasn't right. My gut was telling me this wasn't a typical work meeting. I followed her from a distance, keeping my truck far enough behind so she wouldn't notice. She drove across town, past the residential neighborhoods, and into the outskirts where the newer developments were going up. I expected her to pull into one of the real estate offices or a client's house, but she didn't. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of a hotel. My heart dropped. I parked across the street, watching as she got out of the car. She looked around like she was checking to see if anyone was watching, then walked inside. My mind went blank. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to process what I had just seen. She was meeting this Greg guy at a hotel. I couldn't go in after her. I wasn't sure what I would do if I saw them together. Instead, I reached for my phone and snapped a photo of her walking inside. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to show that something was going on, something she hadn't told me about. I sat in my truck for what felt like hours, staring at the hotel, trying to figure out my next move. Every part of me wanted to storm inside and confront her. But something stopped me. I didn't know if I was ready to face the truth. That night, Lily came home late, just like she always did after one of her meetings. She walked in with a smile, kissed me on the cheek, and asked how my day was. I tried to act normal, tried to keep the anger from bubbling to the surface. But it was there, just beneath the surface, waiting to explode. I couldn't take it anymore. "Who's Greg?" I asked, my voice barely hiding the tension. She froze, her smile fading. "What?" "You heard me," I said, turning to face her fully. "Who's Greg?" Her eyes flicked to the side for a moment, like she was scrambling for an answer. "He's a client," she said, too quickly. "Why are you asking?" "A client," I repeated, my voice flat. "Is that why you met him at the hotel today?" Lily's face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. "I followed you," I continued, my voice cold. "I saw you go into the hotel, so don't lie to me." She blinked, taking a step back, her hand trembling slightly. "Ethan, I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped. "That you're having an affair? That's what this is, right? That's why you wanted an open relationship. Because you've already been seeing someone else." "It's not what you think," she said, her voice breaking. "It's not an affair." "Then what is it?" I demanded, my anger boiling over. "Because it sure as hell looks like one to me." Lily was silent for a long moment, tears welling up in her eyes. It's just emotional," she finally said. "We haven't done anything physical. I swear. I needed someone to talk to. He listens to me, Ethan. He understands me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Emotional affairs. How is that any better? How is that supposed to make me feel less betrayed?" "So what now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "You just keep talking to him until you feel ready to take it further? Is that what this is?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "No, I don't want that. I don't know what I want anymore. I'm confused. Confused. That word again." I stood there, staring at her, wondering how we had gotten to this point. How everything had spiraled so far out of control. And as much as I wanted to yell, to scream, to break something, all I could feel was an overwhelming sense of defeat. The next few days after Lily's confession were a blur. I went through the motions, trying to pretend things were normal, but it was like living with a stranger. I'd catch myself watching her out of the corner of my eye, looking for signs of something deeper, something she wasn't saying. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. One wrong word, and everything would blow up. We didn't talk about Greg again. I didn't push, and she didn't offer anything. I wasn't sure what was worse, the silence or the lies. Then came the family dinner. I had almost forgotten about it, but Lily's mom, Karen, had been planning it for weeks. It was one of those keep-up appearances kinds of gatherings that Karen loved to throw. Nothing too big, just family, maybe Matt, and a few friends. Enough people to make sure everyone saw how perfect the Donovans were. Karen liked to keep things controlled, polished. The kind of woman who always knew what was best for her daughters, and everyone else for that matter. Lily was quiet on the drive over, and I was too. We hadn't had a real conversation since the night I followed her to the hotel. Part of me wanted to cancel, avoid the whole thing, but I knew Karen would read too much into that. She already had her opinions about me, and showing up late or not at all would only confirm what I suspected she thought, that Lily could do better. When we pulled up to the Donovan house, Karen was already on the porch, dressed to the nines as usual. Her smile was wide, but there was always something about it that felt more like a performance than real warmth. "Ethan, Lily." "Right on time," she called, motioning us inside. "Dinner's just about ready." The house smelled like roast chicken and freshly baked bread, and everything was laid out in perfect order. The good silverware, crystal glasses, the works. Karen had a way of making everything look effortless, but I knew better. Every little detail in this house had been controlled and designed by her, just like her daughters' lives. Lily's sister, Julia, was already there, sitting at the table, looking tired but managing a smile. Julia had always been the quieter one, more down-to-earth than her mom or Lily. We exchanged nods as I sat down across from her. Matt wasn't there yet, but I knew he'd show. He never missed these dinners. "So, Ethan," Karen began, settling in her seat at the head of the table. "How's work going?" "Busy, I assume?" There was always an edge to her questions, like she was waiting for me to admit that I wasn't living up to her standards. "Yeah, keeping busy," I replied, keeping it short. "A lot of new developments going up around town." Karen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's wonderful. Lily mentioned how well things have been going for you. Good to see you making something of yourself." There it was, the subtle jab. She was always good at that. Before I could respond, the door swung open, and Matt strolled in, his usual cocky grin plastered on his face. "Sorry I'm late," he called out, giving Karen a quick kiss on the cheek. "Had to finish up a couple things at the bar." Matt and I exchanged nods, but something in his eyes lingered longer than usual when he glanced at Lily. I couldn't place it at first, but there was something there, a flicker of familiarity, maybe something more. My stomach twisted, and I tried to push the thought out of my head, but it was there now, gnawing at me. Dinner was a quiet affair at first, too quiet. Karen kept the conversation moving, asking Lily about work, Julia about her son, and dropping occasional comments about how things could always be better. It wasn't until the wine started flowing that things loosened up. I kept an eye on Lily, trying to gauge where her head was at, but she was hard to read, distant, almost distracted. Matt, on the other hand, seemed unusually comfortable, laughing louder than normal, his arm casually draped behind his chair, always within view of Lily. The wine bottle made its rounds again, and Matt poured himself another generous glass, tipping it slightly toward me. "How's life treating you, man?" he asked, his voice a little looser than usual. "Can't complain," I said, though it was a lie. I could feel the tension building, but I wasn't about to spill everything here, not in front of Karen. Matt took a long sip of his wine and then leaned back in his chair, eyes flicking toward Lily again. "You ever wonder, though, what it would have been like if things had gone differently?" I frowned, not sure where he was going with this. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, giving Lily a sidelong glance that made my skin crawl. "You know, if we'd all made different choices, settled down with different people, explored other options. I mean, we've been in this town forever. Feels like things just fell into place without us even thinking about it, right?" There was again that same word, explore. Lily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face suddenly flushed. She didn't meet my eyes. "What are you trying to say, Matt?" I asked, keeping my tone steady, though I could feel the anger rising in my chest. Matt smirked, taking another sip of wine. "Nothing, man. Just saying, we all wonder sometimes, don't we? Like what would have happened if Lily had, I don't know, explored her options a bit more before settling down. We all have those what-if moments, right?" Lily's eyes snapped to Matt, and I caught the look they shared, brief but telling. My stomach churned. Something passed between them, something I couldn't ignore anymore. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "Is that what you think, Matt? That Lily should have explored her options?" Matt's smirk faltered for a second, but then he laughed, waving it off. "Come on, Ethan. I'm just messing around. No harm meant." But there was harm meant. The weight of his words hung between us, thick and suffocating. I glanced at Lily, waiting for her to say something, anything, to shut him down. But she just sat there, eyes cast down at her plate, silent. Karen, sensing the tension, jumped in. Now, boys, she said, her voice light but firm. Let's keep the conversation pleasant, shall we? It's just dinner after all. But I wasn't in the mood for keeping things pleasant. Not anymore. Lily, I said, my voice low but firm. What's going on here? She looked up at me, her face pale, but still, she didn't speak. Matt, sensing that he'd gone too far, raised his hands in mock surrender. All right. I'm just a little drunk, guys. Don't take it so seriously. But I couldn't brush it off. Not this time. I'd seen the look they shared, heard the weight behind his words, and suddenly everything was clicking into place. The late nights, the distance, the suggestion for an open relationship. It wasn't just about Greg. There was something between Lily and Matt, something that had been there for longer than I realized. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my voice tight with anger. You know what? I think I'm done here. Karen, shocked, looked between me and Lily, clearly not expecting things to escalate. Ethan, don't be ridiculous. Sit down. We're just having dinner. But I couldn't stay. I couldn't pretend anymore. I'll see you at home, I said to Lily, my tone cold, before turning and walking out of the house. The drive home was a blur. My thoughts raced, everything swirling together in a chaotic mess. Matt's words, Lily's silence, the tension that had been building for months. It all pointed to something I didn't want to face. By the time I got home, I couldn't even think straight. I paced the living room, my mind jumping from one thought to the next. How long had this been going on? Had Lily and Matt ever? I couldn't even finish the thought, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. Lily came in about an hour later. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the wall, trying to get a grip on everything. She walked in quietly, not saying a word, but I could feel the tension radiating off her. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady but cold. Lily didn't sit. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face guarded. About what? About Matt, I said, watching her closely. Her eyes flicked to the side for a split second, but it was enough. What about him? Don't play dumb, Lily. I saw the way you two were looking at each other tonight. There's something going on, isn't there? She shook her head, her jaw tightening. You're being paranoid. Matt's just drunk. He says stupid things when he's had too much. Is that all it is? I pressed, standing up, because from where I'm standing, it seems like there's more. Like maybe you've been regretting this relationship for a while. Like maybe that's why you asked for an open relationship, to see if you could have a chance with him. Lily's eyes widened, and for a second, I thought she might admit it. But then her face hardened. You're being ridiculous, Ethan. There's nothing going on between me and Matt. Her words were sharp, but there was something in her tone, a hesitation. I stepped closer, my voice low. Don't lie to me. Not now. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. For the first time, I saw the guilt in her eyes. And in that moment I knew. I stood there, staring at Lily, the silence between us thick and heavy. Her eyes flickered with something, guilt, fear, I couldn't tell. She shifted on her feet, avoiding my gaze, and that small gesture was all the confirmation I needed. My hands were shaking, but I didn't move. I needed answers, real ones this time, and I wasn't going to let her dodge them anymore. You're not even going to deny it, are you? I asked, my voice low but steady. Lily's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. That hesitation, it killed whatever small hope I had left. I knew she wasn't going to admit everything. She never would. Not unless I pushed. I followed you to the hotel, Lily, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw you walk in. I saw you meet Greg. Her eyes snapped up to meet mine, wide with shock. Ethan, don't. I cut her off, the anger boiling beneath the surface now. Don't lie to me. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of you avoiding the truth. You said it was just emotional, that nothing physical happened. But how am I supposed to believe that when you're sneaking around at a hotel with another guy? Lily took a deep breath, her voice trembling. I told you the truth. It was never physical with Greg. You were hiding it, Lily. I shouted, the dam inside me finally breaking. You deleted your messages, you lied about where you were, and you expect me to just believe that nothing happened? Do you even hear yourself? She flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "I didn't know how to tell you." "Yeah, well, you're doing a hell of a job at that," I muttered, pacing the room, trying to calm down. But the more I thought about it, the more everything started to unravel. "And what about Matt? Are you going to tell me that's all in my head, too?" Lily's face drained of color at the mention of his name. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. "I saw the way you two were looking at each other during dinner. And Matt, he practically admitted it. He said you regretted settling down too soon. What the hell was that about, Lily? How long has this been going on?" "It's not what you think," she said, her voice cracking. "Matt, he's just a friend." "A friend?" I scoffed, my chest tightening. "That's your excuse? You and Matt have been friends for years, but I've never seen him act like that around you. So, what is it? You've been seeing him too? Is that why you wanted the open relationship? So you could have your cake and eat it too?" Tears were streaming down her face now, but I didn't care. I needed the truth, even if it tore everything apart. "Ethan, please," she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't like that with Matt. Nothing happened, I swear. We talked, that's all. I felt lost, and he was there, and I don't know. I didn't want to lose you, but I was scared. I was scared that I'd made the wrong choices, that I wasn't enough for you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't about to let her off that easily. "So what? You decided to explore your options? With Greg? With Matt? Who else, Lily?" She shook her head, sobbing now, but I couldn't stop. "You talk about being scared, but you didn't even think about how this would make me feel. You didn't think about what it would do to us. You were too busy playing games with my life." Lily collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I love you, Ethan. I still love you." But her words felt hollow, like they had lost all their meaning. I turned away, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do, where to go from here. Everything felt so wrong. The woman I thought I knew, the relationship I thought we had, it was all falling apart before my eyes, and I didn't know how to stop it, or if I even wanted to anymore. Before I could say anything else, the doorbell rang. I froze, not expecting anyone at this hour. Lily looked up, confused and startled. Who could that be?" she whispered, wiping her tears. I walked to the door, opening it slowly. Standing there, in the dim porch light, was Julia. She looked between me and Lily, her eyes narrowed, as if she already knew something was wrong. "Ethan, can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside, nodding. "Yeah, sure. This isn't exactly the best time, though." Julia walked in, glancing at Lily, whose face was still streaked with tears. She let out a heavy sigh, then turned back to me. "I need to talk to you, Ethan," she said, her voice serious. "About Matt. And Lily." I stiffened at the mention of his name again. "What about him?" Julia shifted uncomfortably, as if she didn't want to say what was coming next. I overheard something, a while ago, a conversation between Lily and Matt. It was before all of this, before she ever mentioned the open relationship. My pulse quickened. "What did you hear?" She hesitated, glancing at Lily, who sat frozen on the couch, her face pale. They were talking, arguing. Actually, it was at a party. I don't think either of them knew I was nearby. Matt said something about how Lily had always wondered what it would have been like if she'd explored her feelings for him. He said it like it was something they'd talked about before, something that was unresolved. I clenched my fists, feeling the blood drain from my face. "What are you saying, Julia? Are you telling me this has been going on for longer than I thought?" Julia bit her lip, glancing between me and her sister. "I don't know how long it's been, but I know Matt's feelings for Lily go back a long way. And I think she felt something too. She just never acted on it. Until recently." Lily gasped, standing up. "Julia, no, that's not true. I never." "Lily, stop," Julia interrupted, her voice firm. "I heard you. I heard the way you were talking to him. This isn't just about Greg. You and Matt. This has been brewing for a while, hasn't it?" I turned to Lily, my heart pounding. "Is that true?" I demanded. "Have you been hiding this from me all this time?" Lily opened her mouth to protest, but she couldn't get the words out. She was cornered, and I could see the fear in her eyes. She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. I never meant for it to go this far. My stomach turned. I felt like I was going to be sick. I couldn't believe it. All this time, all the lies, all the half-truths, it had all been leading to this. It wasn't just about Greg. It wasn't just about the open relationship. It was Matt. It had always been Matt. The one person I trusted the most. The one person who'd been by my side through everything. He was the real betrayal. I stood there, numb, staring at the woman I thought I knew. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But now, I didn't even recognize her. I can't do this. I muttered, my voice hollow. I can't do this anymore. Lily reached out, her voice desperate. Ethan, please. Don't leave. We can fix this. I love you. But I couldn't even look at her. I turned and walked toward the door, my mind racing, my heart shattered. Behind me, I heard her sobs, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, I realized there was no going back. Everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. I had barely slept since the night everything unraveled. The shock of it, the betrayal, it all lingered like a dull ache in the back of my mind. The weight of Lily's confession, Julia's revelation, and the gut-wrenching realization that Matt, my best friend, had been at the center of this mess for years was too much. I spent the next few days going through the motions, trying to keep my mind focused on work, but there was no escaping it. The walls felt like they were closing in, every little thing reminding me of how completely everything had fallen apart. But I wasn't going to let it end like that. I needed closure. I needed to hear it from Matt himself. And I needed to face Lily one last time, to end it on my terms. I decided to confront them all together. There was no sense in dragging this out any longer. I called Julia and asked her to meet me at the bar. She didn't question it, just said she'd be there. I texted Lily, telling her we needed to talk, and that it couldn't wait. Her reply was hesitant, but she agreed. And then there was Matt. I wanted to punch him the second I heard his voice over the phone, but I held it together. We need to talk, I said, keeping my tone as calm as I could manage. Meet me at the bar tonight. No excuses. Matt hesitated. Is this about? Just be there. I cut him off, hanging up before he could say anything else. The bar was quiet when I arrived, a few regulars scattered in the back, nursing beers. I'd picked this place on purpose. Matt's bar, the one where we had shared so many nights, talking about life, work, everything. And now it was going to be the place where I confronted him. I took a seat at the corner booth, my hands gripping the edge of the table as I waited. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't back down now. This was it, the final showdown. I couldn't carry this weight anymore, and I was going to make sure they all knew exactly how I felt. Julia was the first to arrive. She walked in quietly, her face a mixture of concern and sadness. She sat across from me, her eyes searching mine. Are you okay? She asked, though we both knew the answer. No, I admitted, my voice raw. But I will be. She nodded, glancing around. Where's Lily? She's coming, I said, looking toward the door. And Matt, too. Julia raised her eyebrows, clearly surprised. You're bringing him into this? I need the truth, I said, my jaw tightening. From both of them. Before she could respond, the door swung open, and Lily walked in. She spotted us immediately, her steps hesitant as she made her way over. She looked worn down, the guilt hanging on her like a heavy cloak. She sat beside Julia, her eyes darting between us. Ethan, she said softly, her voice fragile. I didn't expect everyone to be here. I didn't respond, just stared at her waiting. And then Matt walked in. He was dressed casually, like it was any other night, but there was a tension in his eyes the moment he saw us all sitting together. He paused at the door, his expression unreadable, before walking over to the booth. Ethan, he said, forcing a smile. What's going on? I motioned for him to sit, and after a moment's hesitation, he did. The tension was thick, suffocating. I looked at each of them, the people I had trusted, the people who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I brought you all here because I'm done with the lies, I said, my voice steady, but barely holding back the anger that simmered beneath the surface. No more games. No more avoiding the truth. We're going to settle this once and for all. Lily looked down at the table, her hands trembling slightly. Matt shifted in his seat, his eyes avoiding mine. I know about you too, I said, the words sharp, cutting through the silence. And I'm not talking about Greg. I'm talking about Matt. How long has this been going on? Lily flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. Ethan, I told you nothing happened. Stop lying, I snapped. Julia told me everything. I know about the conversation, Lily. I know you've had feelings for him. And I know you've been hiding it from me for years. Matt's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, he looked nervous. Look, man, whatever Julia told you, it's not what you think. Isn't it? I said, my voice cold. Then tell me the truth, Matt. Tell me what you've been doing behind my back. Matt swallowed hard, glancing at Lily, but she couldn't meet his gaze. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. All right, fine, he muttered. Yeah, maybe things were a little more complicated between me and Lily than I let on. I felt a cold rush of anger flood through me. Go on. It wasn't an affair, Matt continued, his tone defensive. But yeah, we talked. We had feelings for each other. We never acted on them, though. Not physically. We never crossed that line. You're telling me this was all just talk? I asked, my voice shaking. All these years, the looks, the tension, it was just talk. Matt nodded. I swear, Ethan, nothing happened. But I won't lie, I've been in love with her for a long time. I didn't mean to screw things up for you, but it just had happened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All this time, my best friend had been in love with my fiancée, and they'd been dancing around each other, lying to me, pretending everything was normal. And you encouraged her doubts, didn't you? I pressed. You fed her insecurity, made her question our relationship, so she'd turn to you. Matt didn't respond, but his silence was enough. Lily was crying now, her face buried in her hands. Ethan, I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted it to be like this. I shook my head, feeling the weight of her words crashing down on me. You let him manipulate you, I said quietly. You let him come between us. And for what? Because you weren't sure? Lily looked up at me, her eyes filled with regret. I didn't know what I was doing, she whispered. I was confused. I let myself get caught up in my own fears and what Matt was saying, but I never stopped loving you. I wanted to believe her. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could work through this. But then Matt spoke. There's something else you should know, he said, his voice low. Something I've kept hidden for a long time. I turned to him, my stomach twisting. What now, Matt? He hesitated, glancing at Lily, who looked terrified. A few years ago, Lily was pregnant. I felt like the world stopped. Lily's face went pale, her eyes wide with fear. Matt, don't. I'm sorry, Lily, he said, his voice shaking. But he deserves to know. The baby, it wasn't his. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at Lily, the shock hitting me like a freight train. What? I whispered, barely able to get the words out. Lily was sobbing now, shaking her head. I didn't know how to tell you, she cried. I lost the baby before I could say anything. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake, and I never wanted you to know because it didn't matter. It didn't change how I felt about you. Matt's voice broke through the chaos. She had a miscarriage, Ethan. We covered it up, made it seem like it was a health issue. But it was mine. The rage that hit me was overwhelming. I stood up, barely able to control myself, my fist clenched so tight I thought I might break. You both lied to me. About everything. I'm sorry, Lily whispered, her voice broken. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with them. I turned and walked out, the sound of Lily's sobs and Matt's hollow apologies fading into the background. Outside, the night air was cold and biting, but I barely felt it. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing, my heart shattered. There was no fixing this, no going back. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I had was gone. I pulled out my phone, opening the real estate app I'd been browsing earlier. I was selling the house. I didn't care anymore. This town, this life, it wasn't mine anymore. As I stood there, watching the breath leave my body in sharp puffs, I realized I was done. Done with Lily, done with Matt, done with the lies and betrayal. I was leaving, and I wasn't looking back. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe to the channel, put a like under the video, and write a comment about how you like this story.